Medien und Kommunikation. Insbesondere, wenn heute was schief geht, und da muss es gar nicht der Fall Tönnies sein, es kann jederzeit sein, dass bei Ihnen was schief geht, dann fragen eventuell Medien mal an und Sie fragen sich, was tue ich jetzt? Und wenn es dann schief geht, dann werden Sie sehr schnell falsch zitiert, oder wenn Sie den Klassiker sagen, kein Kommentar, dann wird man natürlich schreiben, dass Sie entweder gar nichts sagen wollten, was Ihnen auch was aussagen könnte, oder man wird Ihnen irgendetwas in den Mund legen. Der Punkt ist, viele haben Angst davor, falsch verstanden zu werden. Und hier haben wir heute jemanden bei uns, der sich genau damit beschäftigt hat. Guy Clapperton ist nicht nur selber Journalist, sondern mittlerweile selbstständig im Medientraining. Er hat geschrieben unter anderem für den Guardian und somit für renommierte Magazine und Zeitschriften auf internationaler Ebene. Er wird heute mit uns hier teilen, wie Sie in den Medien besser kommunizieren können und insbesondere auch in Krisenfällen besser dastehen. Das Interview wurde in englischer Sprache durchgeführt. Media, Communications and the Future. Many corporates now face a challenging time and see that communication is rapidly changing quicker than often they can cope with. And I have an international expert today with me, not only someone who wrote for newspapers like The Guardian, but someone who has decades of experience not only in the media area, but also as a speaker known as the Near Futurist, running a successful podcast with thousands of listeners. Hello and welcome, Guy Clapperton.
Hello, Niels. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for taking the time, and we get straight into it. I prepared for this interview, and we have quite a number of cases where people said, we have a couple of issues at the moment happening at the same time. So getting to the most obvious one in the first place, COVID-19. How do I communicate when I basically know that I have a massive economical problem which I cannot communicate, because as a vendor I would be immediately taken off any list to cooperate with? But how do I tell people that there are challenges, that services might be slower, that there might be interruptions without losing customers, clients, and my reputation on the market?
Okay, I think honesty is the best policy. I don't want to use cliches, but I do think that a full declaration as soon as possible is a really good idea, because everybody else is going to be in the same position. And the result is that an awful lot of people are getting more patient than they were. In terms of how you communicate it, I think the message is always more important than the medium. People are fretting about whether they've got the right camera, whether they've got the right microphone, all that sort of stuff. Actually, I think just focus on what you're saying at the moment rather than how you're saying it. And don't try and deceive people. Don't save up trouble for later when it's actually got worse with no warning.
That's excellent advice. And now I have an additional question, because we had people who tried exactly that, and then they said, we agreed on it, the media team agreed on it, the PR agency said we should do exactly that. And then the leadership team said, this is not possible because that could show that we have a certain weakness. And the leadership team suddenly is the biggest resistance to communicate openly. And many people struggle to convince senior leadership or the board level of open and honest communication. How do I deal with senior members who are in business maybe 10, 15, 20 years longer than the people who have to deal with them? How do I convince them to change their attitude towards showing the strong brand to the outside, which at the moment we definitely are not?
Well, I think the first thing you do is to take all those skills you were using to communicate with the senior leaders before, because if you reflect on it, you'll find many of them have never been that cooperative. They've always thought they know it all. This isn't new. It's just been ramped up a little bit because of COVID-19. So use all those skills to communicate with them. Case studies and examples of companies that have done well by being a little more honest, a little more open, are always really good. Because if you're the head of, say, some major drinks company, and they say something like, we can't do this because people will think we're weak. And then you can say, yeah, but look at drinks company B that said it was doing well, and then its order book fell off, whereas company C that said it's struggling, and was open about it, actually got extended credit terms and was able to continue through it. I think it's always following by example, and following examples is something that business people will always understand.
Excellent. That is very good. And of course, we have one example where things went wrong. So first, I appreciate the person sending that to me. Of course, I will keep anonymous which company it was, but it was a company in southern Germany. So we had COVID-19, we had a slow reopening. Then it was allowed to have 50% of the people back, and people told their senior leadership team that it isn't possible to keep social distance rules in place in the small offices they have. The response of the leadership team was, they should all get back to work and be happy that they still have their job, because otherwise there will be no need for social distancing in the future, because we're going to lay off half of the staff. So people showed up back for work but couldn't get back to work because one employee called the police, who shut down the whole site, and that went to press. What do you do when you have obvious leadership misbehavior and it is obvious that you've done something wrong, and now you have to make a statement, which of course you try to be as open as possible, but also basically get away with the best result?
I think one possible strategy is to show your senior leadership a clipping about that very story. The idea that somebody actually had their whole operation closed down because they refused to work within the rules is salutary for us all. Business is very important. Business keeps us going. It keeps us able to afford things. It keeps the tax coffers filled. It keeps the health services running. It keeps education running. But human lives are more important than that, because without human lives, there's no business. It's all a continuum, of course. But I think you've got to get your priorities straight. And if you know of an example where someone was actually closed down because their bosses were trying to do exactly what your bosses are about to do, then that's what you tell the senior leadership team.
Yeah, very good advice. Thank you very much indeed. And of course, if COVID-19 is not enough, the next issue was just on the horizon, named diversity. A couple of teams struggled when they said they want to make a statement about diversity. And I have to, these are not my words. These are words from senior leadership team members talking to a marketing and PR department, saying we're not going to make any supporting statement about Black Lives Matter, because that could offend our rather conservative audience, and they are the biggest group of people buying our products. How to deal with that? Saying nothing, just accepting it?
I think you could make a holding statement by saying that you're observing what's going on, you're going into a learning phase, and you're going to make a declaration, as long as you actually do make a declaration after a few days or weeks or however long it takes. But I don't think it's acceptable at the moment. And if it doesn't rebound on you immediately, it will rebound on you eventually. You've got to have some sort of policy, some sort of statement out there on exactly what you are doing about equality, whether it's racial, sexual, whatever it is.
And then, of course, the next problem could come up, because they said the next problem would be, if we make a statement about diversity, people could go on our website, click on leadership team, and there you see a picture, 8 men in dark suits, white shirts, black ties, all male. So how can I communicate about diversity when, well, let's say our leadership team doesn't really reflect on it too well, and the excuse for that is always, we are a conservative industry?
I think if I can put it this way, it would be amazing if every organization had managed to set itself completely right and realigned itself only a couple of weeks after the Black Lives Matter issue really started to hit the headlines. Of course, the equality moves are overdue. Of course, nobody's done enough just yet. However, I think you can say that you're making moves as long as you are making moves. And no, it's not going to be perfect overnight.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. And now, of course, as the near futurist, people want to know, how will the future of media communications look like? Because many people say we are facing severe amount of stress at the moment. We have a higher employee turnover. We have a record low employee motivation, very low employee engagement, and people are reconsidering careers quite quickly, even in times of crisis. So how, in your opinion, will not only because you're also an events MC, so first, of course, put it into different question. First question, how will the future of media communications look like? And in your opinion, as well as an events MC, how will the future of events look like?
Well, I think an awful lot of it's going virtual. Media isn't such a big issue because, of course, people like me have been typing away at our keyboards or talking to our cameras for quite some time. I suspect there'll be less in-person reporting and an awful lot more on Skype, on Zoom, or on whatever else they happen to be using, and a lot more desk research. What does trouble me a little is the cynicism around the media, and the fact that the phrase mainstream media keeps coming in as if there's some great big one lump of conspiracy theory driven media. There genuinely isn't. There is no sort of cabal of people. The idea that we'd be that organized is just absurd. So I think that was the media will continue as it was, but I think the paper stuff and handling paper was on the way out anyway. That may have accelerated. And I think in terms of the events, I could see virtual events staying with us for a long time. What seems to have happened with COVID-19 is we've actually absorbed, in technology terms, we've absorbed 10 years of evolution towards virtuality and virtualization, I should say, because that's actually the word. We've absorbed 10 years of virtualization in the space of just 3 months, because suddenly, whereas people were starting to tentatively do video meetings, suddenly everybody's doing video meetings. And the upside is that it suddenly doesn't matter if one of your colleagues is in another country. You and I are not in the same country as we speak. I can tell you're not being rained on like I am. So it's those advantages. The fact we've known for ages in theory that that's possible. That suddenly becomes a reality, and it will be very difficult to go back from what is actually proving to be very convenient.
Excellent. And just to wrap the interview up, one last question. Many people say media and communications for us are very important to engage with our potential audience, potential customers, potential clients. So we now went virtual because events on site weren't possible. Many struggle to get the same amount of interaction, engagement, and of course, conversion rate. What is your experience as a very experienced MC and event host? What should companies do better to get online events really up and running?
Well, I think the first thing is sort of get help from an expert. Obviously, I'm available, but many others are as well. So the second, have a look at the structure of your meetings. Attention spans fall off a cliff when you're on screen. So when I'm running an event, for example, people have told me that they really like the fact that I put videos in, I keep polling them. What they don't realize necessarily, or if they do, they're too polite to say, is I've just made sure that anytime they've been listening to my voice for longer than 10 minutes or longer, I make absolutely certain that there's an interruption of some sort so they can be doing something else, so they can then get their attention properly back on it. People's attention will wander. I once saw a presentation by a speaker who was giving precisely that advice, and after 10 minutes he did break the run of things with, I think it was an audience poll. But what he then did was, unfortunately, he then carried on for 40 minutes uninterrupted with just his own voice, and by the end of it, everybody I knew who'd watched it, this was before COVID-19, we were all in a room watching this guy presenting from another country. By the end of it, we were all thinking, what on earth was that? And why did you break your own rule? It was just so, I won't say boring, because he had some very good stuff, but it was very difficult to concentrate on.
Excellent advice. And of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast so people can get in touch with you if they want to discuss that further, or when they want to. Sorry?
They'd be very welcome, and thank you very much indeed for that.
I will do so. And of course, I highly recommend you as an events MC as well. I saw you hosting events many times, so highly recommended from my point. So the only thing I can say at the end of this interview is, Guy, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for yours.